and Edmonton was down. I don't remember. They were down by a couple points, but Ricky Ray threw a pass to Fred Stamps in the end zone for literally the win. And we were standing like on the field, like right where he caught it. And it was so loud down.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 23rd episode of the Underrated Podcast, the podcast where we talk to you about sports and rant about a bunch of stuff that we think should be ranted about. Today, we have a special guest back with the guest part. Since last episode, we kind of skipped out on a guest. She is the sports anchor and reporter for Sportsnet, and she has made appearances on CTV Yorkton, Prince Albert, Saskatoon, and Edmonton, with covering the Edmonton Oilers and the Edmonton Eskimos. Natasha Staniszewski, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. You nailed my last name. Well done. That's
And how are you doing during this time?
You know what, guys? I'm doing all right. I'm not working a whole lot, which I don't love. I miss work. I miss reading highlights. I miss being in the newsroom. But other than that, I can't complain. I'm healthy. My family's healthy. I'm just trying to stay busy at home, kind of stay productive, and that's it. So I'm all right.
That's awesome. And it's always awesome to see somebody that we've watched this childhood. Maybe you've been on the morning segment of Sportscentre, which we'll get into in a little bit. We want to take you through your early career. So we've seen you all around the sports industry, whether that be the Grey Cup with football, whether that be hockey, whether that be like a little bit of football, baseball, that kind of stuff around the sports industry. But was there something specific that sparked that love for sports maybe earlier in your life?
I kind of just grew up always playing sports. My parents put all three of us kids, I have a younger sister and a younger brother, they put us all in sports at a young age. I was playing soccer, I think, when I was 6 or 7. That was my first sport, and then I played everything like through junior high and high school. So volleyball, basketball, that kind of stuff. My brother played hockey, so I was at the rink a lot with him, watching him. And I guess that's just where my love of the game, love of competition kind of grew. Being in Edmonton, which is a pretty crazy hockey town. I remember being an Oilers fan, since I was, grade 3 or grade 4. Same with the Eskimos. So I just loved sports. And when I was in high school, I kind of just started thinking, I'd watch Hockey Night in Canada every Saturday, and I, would see some of the interviews and the anchors doing the highlights and stuff. And I always thought, I feel like I could maybe do that. And so I did eventually. That's the short answer to your question.
And then you did mention that you were the oldest of your family, the oldest of your 3 or 2 siblings. So were you the ruler of the sports in the house, would you say, like the ruler of your siblings?
No, I don't think so. So I'm the shortest in my family. My brother, I think he's 6'2", maybe taller, and my sister is, I want to say 5'10". So they were actually much better athletes than I was. My sister played for a year with the Pandas basketball team at the U of A, and my brother went pretty far in hockey. He's just a natural athlete. He's good at everything. It's super annoying. I'm always really jealous of him. So we were kind of all into everything together. So I wouldn't say I was necessarily the ruler. I just wish I was a little bit better than I was.
Kind of like the roles were reversed, essentially.
Well, here's what it is, I think, is being the oldest, when your parents put you into sports, your younger siblings are just kind of around it, even if they're not totally playing it, right? Or they just get dragged along with you. So let's say if I'm 8 doing something and my sister's 6, she's already kind of doing it too. So she kind of already has a 2-year advantage on me. So that's the theory that I'm going with, why the younger siblings are better athletes than the older ones.
Yeah, I'm a complete opposite. Like my brother, he is a big sports guy. Like he plays rep sports all around. I just kind of follow him. He's been a lot more exposed to sports. I just like the analogy of sports and talking about sports, which is why we kind of started this sports podcast. So it's good to relate to that.
Right.
And going into your career as a reporter and an anchor, was there like a moment where you had the thought that you could go into a major sports industry such as like TSN or Sportscentre?
What a good question, because when I decided to make the switch, I was initially working in business and in HR, and then I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. So when I decided to make the switch and go back to school to get my TV diploma, My goal at the time was just to get to Edmonton. Like I knew I'd probably have to leave home and go work in some smaller markets. And I thought if I could just get back to Edmonton, work for CTV or Global and just cover the Oilers and the Eskimos and all the teams that I grew up watching, that I would be happy. I thought that would be it. But then I had the opportunity to come to TSN and come to Toronto. They offered me a position, and I never thought I would. I wasn't really sure I wanted to move away from my family, move to Toronto. I wasn't sure I knew enough about sports to actually work at TSN. But when they offered me the job, I thought it was too good of an opportunity to say no. So I just said yes. And here I am 9 years later.
And did that, the stress about your like not knowing enough, did that ever have any effect on maybe your mental capabilities of going into your job? Did that ever have like an effect on that?
Oh yeah. It took me a while to build up my confidence for sure at TSN. Like I was never really into the NFL. Let's use that as an example. Like being from Edmonton, sort of a prairie city, the CFL was kind of always at the forefront for me and kind of everybody in those areas. So then I moved here, and like you knew about the Patriots and the Steelers. You kind of know about the main stories, but some of the little things there was a big learning curve, I would say. There was a pretty big learning curve with that kind of stuff. Even like the Jays, like I remember watching when they won the World Series, but I wasn't that into baseball. So as much as I, let's say, knew hockey like the back of my hand, there were other sports that took me a while to get used to, just the general knowledge, even pronouncing some of the names, which is kind of the worst thing. Like I feel the second you mispronounce a name on the air, people call you out on it, or they think you're fraud or whatever. So, and there were definitely a few names that I mispronounced. But that's just, I don't know, that's the way life is, right? Like you never really think you're ready for it, but you kind of just have to jump in and see how it goes.
And I think Jay and Dan has really taken that kind of like kind of that whole misbite, kind of like imperfections of like going on live TV, and kind of have spurred that to its own segment at the end, which is kind of perfect to kind of see where they kind of, again, like where they kind of nitpick their work to see, hey, we did this wrong, and this wrong. That's kind of a great thing to add at the end.
They were so smart in doing that, because it's better to just if you make a mistake, don't pretend it didn't happen. Just kind of make fun of it, because people know that you made a mistake, right? So if you can admit it on the air, I feel like your audience they can just relate to you and they laugh with you, and it's more real. Like you're never going to be 100% perfect in any job that you do. It's just that unfortunately on TV, people see your mistakes, right? So if you can just kind of go along with it, roll along with it, you're usually better off for it. So yeah, they got pretty good at that.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So you know that we also know you covered the WHL University Athletics before moving to the 2010 Grey Cup. Where the Grey Cup host over 10 million viewers that year, which is impressive. How different was the change from covering the WHL to covering an event like the Grey Cup?
Yeah, good question. So when I covered the WHL, that was my first sports job was in Prince Albert in Saskatchewan. So I covered the Raiders there for 9 months, and then I covered the Blades in Saskatoon for about 2 years. So when I was working there, I kind of did anchoring and reporting duties. So I'd go out to practices, I'd be at the games, pre-game, during the game, after the game, and I'd be interviewing the players. I did some radio hits once in a while, and then I would, write the highlights, edit the highlights, anchor the highlights. I would do my own story. So I was kind of doing everything for the WHL, and you're kind of, I don't know, you get to talk to the players every day, which is kind of cool. And game days, like I love game day. Like I miss that now that I anchor. I don't really get to do that. So that part was super fun. And then when you go to the Grey Cup, I think I covered a practice or two, but mostly I was anchoring by that time in Edmonton, so I didn't quite get as close to it. But it is a huge, just on a whole other level in terms of what the Grey Cup means. I mean, to Canada, really, like it's such a huge deal to be a Canadian and to be watching the Grey Cup. And you have two teams that, I find covering football hard sometimes. There's so many players on both teams, right? Like if you're there every single day, covering them every day, it's hard to know who's who all the time and who's doing what. So I don't know, every event, every sport that you do can be really different, just depending on what it is. But the Grey Cup, I remember it was it was a big deal. And seeing all the TSN cameras at the Grey Cup in Edmonton, I was like, oh, right. Like Sarah Orlesky. I always remember Sarah Orlesky because she was covering it at the time. And of course it was like 35 below or whatever in Edmonton. And she had like her full parka and snowsuit and her toque, and she was on the field like the whole game or whatever, doing her thing. And that's actually a reason I don't like covering football, because it's so cold all the time. But anyways, yeah, it was just such a spectacle to be at the Grey Cup and to see it. So it was pretty cool.
Was that something you kind of looked forward to covering, or was it something that just happened? You kind of took the opportunity.
It just kind of happened. I mean, there were at each station, like at CTV, there were 3 of us and 3 people in the sports department, and that's it, So either I was going to be reporting or anchoring, so I was going to be involved somehow, and it just kind of happened that way.
Now, if you got that opportunity again, would you take it, or would you just kind of say like, nah, I don't want to go in the cold again?
Oh, I think I would take it. I wouldn't be such a wimp, and I would be okay with it. Yeah, I would make it happen. It's pretty awesome to be on the field. One of my favorite memories of working in Edmonton is one of my first Eskimo games covering it as a reporter. I remember Edmonton was playing Calgary, and it was a super close game, and we walked, the game was almost over, and we walked down onto the field, and we got ready to do our player interviews. And Edmonton was down, I don't remember. They were down by a couple points, but Ricky Ray threw a pass to Fred Stamps in the end zone for literally the win. And we were standing like on the field, like right where he caught it. And it was so loud down there when he caught it, because the whole stadium was full, right? And the cheering was so loud. So to be on the field during a football game is pretty cool. It's just such a different experience to be down there with the fans like all around you and as loud as they are.
And if Toronto, say, would ever get a team in maybe the NFL and you were opportunity to do the Super Bowl, would that be something that would be absolutely crazy?
I feel like I probably wouldn't get close to a Super Bowl because there's so many reporters above me on the food chain. But yeah, I mean, the Super Bowl I don't know if there's an event quite like the Super Bowl. So if I could be a part of that in any way, I would for sure jump at that chance.
And then we also talked about, earlier that we talked about you transitioning from the WHL to the Grey Cup. Now transition from CTV and the Grey Cup over to Sportscentre, where you are now, and where people like us most know you from the morning television with either Kate Burness or your kind of early days. But how was that transition different from the other one?
So CTV to TSN was really different because when you're kind of in those cities and like the local stations, it's just such a smaller team, and you're in a big station and there's there's news and there's weather and there's a whole bunch of other things, and sports is kind of just one little piece of like a huge unit. When you're at TSN, it's all sports all the time, right? And you have a team of like 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 people, whatever it is, like on any given night, helping you with the highlights and the writing and whatever. So it's just on such a bigger scale. And it's actually pretty cool because it is fun to be in an all sports environment where, yeah, there's no news or weather or whatever. It's just all sports all the time, and everybody is super into it. So it's just like a big sports machine. So making that jump is pretty cool.
Now, here's a question I think I've kind of wanting to know. I'm sure a lot of people have watched SportsCenter and wanted to know. Are the people that you can see behind the glass there typing on the computers, is that just like an animation, or are those people actually there?
No, those people are actually there. They're very real. And without them, there would be no show. Those are probably the most important people of the entire show. All those people running back there or sitting back there, they're doing everything from watching the highlights to writing the highlights to making the little graphics that you see, from writing the bumpers, those things that you say into commercials. Like, they're responsible for so many little details of the show. So those people are very real, and I miss them all. I haven't seen them for weeks and weeks and weeks. So yeah, they're super real and super important.
And how was that feeling to be in front of the desk, in front of how many cameras there are? How was that feeling the first time you did that?
It was scary. I remember my first show vividly. I was very, very, very nervous. But it's like with all things, you get used to it and you just kind of forget all the people who are watching you. Like when you're in the actual studio, it's usually just you, another anchor, and maybe one camera person. And that's it. Like in the studio, it's actually pretty quiet, or on set. So sometimes it's easy to forget that there's thousands of people watching you. So at first it is very nerve-wracking, and then you get actually really comfortable. Sometimes almost too comfortable, I think, when you're up there.
Yeah, what has been now in all the years you have covered Sportscentre and been on Sportscentre covering sports, what has been your favorite Sportscentre moment?
Favorite Sportscentre moment?
It's a lot to choose from.
Yeah, that's a tough one to choose from. I would love to say, oh, it was when the Oilers won the Stanley Cup, but unfortunately I can't say that yet. I mean, this, I guess recency bias comes into play a little bit, but when the Raptors won the championship, I was working that night, and that was really cool to see. I think everybody had thought they had a great shot to make the finals, but to actually win the whole thing, I don't think many gave them a chance. So to see them actually do it was pretty incredible. And for all those people that you just mentioned working in the back, like all the people who were born in Toronto and have watched the Raptors so vividly or so closely since they were born, it was cool to see all the love and how much they appreciated seeing the championship as well. So that was that's for sure one of the biggest moments that I've experienced at Sportscentre.
And along with your inclusion with Sportsnet, we also saw a video or a segment with Jay from Jay and Dan, and you were featured in Whip It Up Whenever. It was like a little cooking segment. Was that something that maybe you brought up that you thought would make I mean, he said passion for cooking. I know that you love cooking. Was that something that would brighten up your career and like make something that you could look forward to when it's a little bit down?
Yeah, I think the baking thing kind of just happened organically. I just started posting stuff on Instagram and people seemed to like it. So I just kept doing it sort of. And then I turned it into Whip It Up Whenever, to my little hashtag. So it's kind of like a fun side project, I guess. I'm not really sure where it'll go, if anywhere, but Jay is actually a huge supporter of it. And he's always bugging me and telling me to try and get a show or to get on YouTube or whatever. But yeah, for now, it's just kind of like a fun little hobby on the side, and we'll see where it goes. It's actually interesting. For as many people who stop me on the street and say, oh, you're that girl on TSN, there's just as many people who say, we love your baking, keep up your baking, we love your. So I guess I'll keep doing it as long as people keep liking it.
Is there somebody, maybe like a guest that you're kind of eyeing that you want on, maybe beyond TSN?
For a baking, you mean?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
as like in that segment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be really fun to bake with athletes and see what they like to eat on their off days or on their cheat days. So, I mean, any of them I think would be interesting. I think they're so healthy now and they're so regimented, and it's important to eat well and exercise and whatever else. But I'm sure they all have secret little loves of sugar that I would love to find out about.
Yeah, that kind of like that pre-game meal that you see. I think that actually reminds me of a segment that I forget. There was like some sort of company that did an advertisement with Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet about peanut butter and jelly. That always, anything with like athletes and cooking always reminds me of those weird segments.
I think it's just because you remember those because you get to see athletes in a different area than just the arena, right? You see another side of them because I feel like so many athletes are so stoic and they kind of hide their emotions when they're playing or even in the post-game interviews. But when you see them cooking or baking or whatever, they kind of relax a little bit. And I think that's really interesting for fans to see that different side of them.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. All right, so we're going to move on to kind of more sports side of things. And the NWHL recently announced that they are expanding to Toronto, and they're letting fans kind of name the team. Now, what are your opinions, of course, on this kind of expansion?
To be honest, I'm a huge supporter and fan of women's hockey, and I would love to see it grow in any way that it can. I don't know enough about the different leagues and the way it's set up to know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest. I feel like some of the women were in talks with the NHL to kind of partner up with them. I'm not sure if that went anywhere. Now this pandemic is sort of putting a hold on a lot of things. So, yeah, so that's my best answer for you, I guess. I just don't know enough about it to know if it'll be an effective way to get the women's game to grow, but anything that is, I'm all for it. I think it's a great game, and I wish people watched it more, and I wish the women got paid more for sure. I wish they got a little bit more credit for their game. So I feel like it's moving in that direction slowly. It might take some time to get there, but hopefully it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I feel like there's not enough. I think there's kind of not enough there. This has been, of course, rumored over like a few years now that the end, like ever since the CWHL folded, I think a year or two ago now, that the NWHL's kind of been in talks with expanding to Toronto. And of course they have, I think I read up on it. They have a team in like Connecticut. They have a team in, I think they have one in Buffalo, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
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 So
I'm surprised. Yeah, exactly.
Kind of a wait and see thing at this point.
Yeah.
And could this, do you say, could be an opportunity for girls that play minor hockey in Toronto or maybe just a bit outside of Toronto to finally find their passion and push towards maybe a professional league? Do you think this expansion would help those with help all the girls that with confidence going into a professional league?
I mean, I would hope so. I know that, I think I have her story straight, but you guys probably know Tessa Bonham from TSN as well. I'm pretty sure that when she was growing up, she played on a boys team for the longest time. And then she went to Ohio State and played hockey there. She had to leave Canada. I think that was her best opportunity to be competitive. So for sure, if there were more opportunities to play competitively here in the country, in Canada, I think that would only do good things for the women's game. And for sure, the more you see it happening, the more you think you can do it, right? Like when I first thought about going into sports, there actually weren't a lot of women doing it on TV, and that kind of is what held me back a little bit. But as soon as I saw more, then I was like, okay, they're doing it, I can do it too. So just having that visibility in Toronto or in Canada or whatever, for sure that would help young girls, I think, who want to play the game.
Yeah, a lot of women's sports and women in the media have certainly increased over the past 10 years, and it's a great thing to see.
Yeah, when I first started at TSN, I believe there were only three or four female anchors, and now I think we outnumber the men. So yeah, we've made huge strides for sure.
That's awesome here. And as just like a final question to end it off, we also talked about your contribution with Kate Burness on Sportscentre, and she is a big contributor with women's hockey. She started a lot of stuff that involved. Are you also involved with the stuff that she is doing? Like, has she come to you about that kind of stuff?
Are you talking about her mark?
Yeah.
Yeah. So her mark, that is mostly just Kate. She kind of championed that whole thing. She has I believe she's in partnership with Under Armour, and I think it was Under Armour who went to her or said, if you ever wanted to start like a charity or whatever you want, we'll help you do that. So I think they kind of put their heads together, and she thought, okay, let's try and inspire some young women to be active and to play sports, and just it's obviously there's so many advantages to it physically, mentally, as a kid when you're growing up. So that is all Kate, and it's amazing. She's grown it from just like a one-day event thing to I think she wanted to do it like across the country in a couple different places, and I know she had a special on TSN last week. So it's a great initiative for sure.
Okay, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it as much as everybody else.
You're welcome, guys. This was fun. Thanks for asking me. And I guess I'll say what everybody says these days. Stay safe.
You too.